Hey guys, so today we're going to go through a demo demo and tutorial on creating your first site definition and basic template creation to kind of support this site definition. So who am I? My name is Dylan Young. I'm a manager of platforms at Aero Digital. I currently live in Palm Beach, Florida, um, and I've been working with Sitecore since 7.2. I can be reached through one of those channels below. I'm pretty active, or starting to become pretty active on Twitter. Also, you can find me on Slack or on the Stack Exchange network. So let's get going. So why create a site definition? It's a very good question. So there's kind of two purposes. You might be creating a new solution. You have just purchased a Sitecore license and you're creating your first site. For example, you could be creating acme.com as your primary domain, and you'll be creating your first site definition for that. The second purpose would be, and more common purpose, is that you already have acme.com, but you want to create a microsite, or you might have the need for creating acmecanada.com. So these are some of the reasons why you might create a site definition. What is a site definition? That's also a very good question. It's basically a XML definition that contains information for each site. So for example, for the Acme, you might have a definition that would contain a host name, the language version, default language version of that site. So for example, the default language site for a US based website might be EN. It also contains other information important to the site, such as the starting item, the root item, HTML cache settings, other various caching settings, things like that. So it's a very useful definition just to kind of define your site. Also, you can potentially also extend it to include other definitions or other attributes for a specific website. If it's more, at a more specific level than maybe having something in a Sitecore item to define that setting. So if it's a one-time setting, it's something that only a backend developer might set, and you will never want to customize it again. You might add it to an attribute inside your site definition. Also, it's important to note that there's two places that you can technically edit this site definition. You could do it inside your Sitecore config, which was the way from 8.1 and beyond, you'd have a Sitecore config where you could set this. Also, if you're before 8.1, you would have done this through the web.config, which is in the website root of your website. That is not, in my opinion, the best practice for where you'd want to change the site definition. In this demo, I'm going to show you how to do it via patching. Any changes you ever make to the Sitecore config or the web.config, depending on your version, you should do it through a patch config. I will include a link below to a patching tutorial on how you patch configs, but I will also show you how you can create a site definition patch config in this tutorial. So next is, with the creation of a site definition, we also need to create templates and content items. So for those of you that have followed this kind of series on my YouTube channel, you know that the last thing I showed was on creating a basic layout. In that tutorial, we didn't at that point have anything in our content tree. So in order to create a site definition, you have to point it to a starting item for the site. That starting item is basically the homepage of the site. For this session, in order to show you everything that you would do to create a new site, I will create some basic templates. I'm not going to go into deep detail on the template creation. There will be a future video where I will show some of the things that you'll need to know in order to create different types of templates or different thoughts while creating a template for an item. All right, so that's pretty much it. We'll go into the demo next. Yeah, that's it. All right, so now to start our demo, to start out, we'll start with the actual template creation because we'll need that first before we can actually start defining our site definition. So we'll navigate over back to the browser and go to our example project. I've actually left it in this place where we were editing the layout from the last video. So to start out, we'll start defining templates. So if you've never done this before, how to access the template area, you can see that there's these main areas underneath the Sitecore content item or Sitecore item. Such as content, which is where all your content goes, layout, which is where the layout specific items will end up going, and then media library, which is where images, videos, PDFs, etc. would end up. Social is related to social channels, not really something we'll cover necessarily. System is where dictionaries might live. There might be rules defined in here. There's a lot of system level on the, at least on the master database side, system level item settings. And then lastly is the templates. So we'll open up templates. Let me log in real quick. Go into templates. So we have this structure here. Typically what I do, and I've seen other implementations do this, is I'll create a folder that represents the project or represents the overall solution. For this, I'll just call it example. So inside example, how you structure the folder structure, it depends on the project. I'm just going to do what I typically do, which is where I'll give, typically you'll want to have some sort of base templates. So I create a base folder, and then we're going to create, we're pretty much going to create a site folder template, a home page template, and I'll introduce the concept of a global template. So to do that, a site folder template is typically what I will do is I'll create something called a folders folder. Kind of weird naming there, but and this will contain folders, or this will contain items that are used like folders. So if you had a blog, you might have a blog item that is like a folder template, but it contains other items within it. And then the home template, that's kind of what I call pages, because these are really just standalone pages. They're not really going to have a whole lot of content in them. So I'll just call that pages. And then lastly is a global. This is a little bit more open to suggestion, but typically I will call this configuration, or I think configuration makes the most sense for this. So these are kind of higher level. Actually, the global folder is actually more like a folder. So yeah, it's really, I mean, that's my first biggest challenge when I learned Sitecore, is how do you architect this? What makes logical sense? So I'll just call this configuration. It doesn't really matter how you set this up. So first, I'll go ahead and I'll create a base template. So I'll create a very generic, I'll just call it base, and it will contain, it will use the inner template as the default template for this. So I'll just create next, and I'll assign it to base, and that is it. So now base is sitting here. One thing to keep in mind is that so you can assign to each template, you can assign it a template that it inherits from, but then you can also assign it multiple base templates that it can kind of inherit from. So that was a pretty confusing part for me when I first started doing development, but it's pretty straightforward. Standard templates brings in kind of all those fields that you'll see when you're editing items that are Sitecore specific fields. Whereas the base templates might not necessarily be that. It might be templates that are, for example, if you had a blog, you might have a base page. You might say that that blog inherits from some sort of article. So you could have multiple base templates for this blog template that you're creating, and then these fields from these other base templates would be pulled into this blog template that you create. All right, so I'll go ahead and save that. I think I already did, but so I'm going to go ahead and create a base page template. And so I'm going to inherit this from the one I just created. So instead of that, I'll call it example and base. Now, some might say that that doesn't make sense. You might want to have base, the base page not necessarily inherit from base page, but you kind of start creating these hierarchies of inheritance. It's kind of a lot like C#, where you would have a class, and then it might have a base class, and then that base class might have another base class, and so forth, so forth. So I create a base page, base this. I'm gonna go ahead now and create a home template. So this would represent any home items that you create in your trees. So for example, acme.com would have one home item, and it would inherit from this. And then if you create a microsite, it would also use the same template. It would just be a different item deriving from this template. So I'll call this, or I'll have it inherit from base page because it's a base, or it's a page item. All right, so let's start thinking about some of the fields. So creating a template is really super easy, but then each template you kind of define what fields make up that template. So first off, let's give the home item a icon. I see a lot of old existing implementations that have no icons, and it's kind of like a visual cue to the content editor if they're working inside the content editor system, that kind of allows them to know what kind of items they might be working on. So they can associate some sort of icon with the home item, for example, or with a site folder, or a blog or an article, etc. I haven't opened this in a while, so it's a little slow. All right, now that's loaded, we will go to the Networks tab and find a suitable image. I'm looking for something that looks like a house. There it is. So we'll select this item as the icon, or it's not really an item, but the icon for this item. So now you can see it shows up as an icon inside the tree, as well as inside the editable region here. So like I said, let's go ahead and start building some fields out. I was just thinking that maybe what we should do is define some fields actually for the base page. Some good examples of a base page some fields that might make sense for a base page would be meta tag information. So I'll just call it meta information. So there will be the meta title. It'll be a single line. Meta description. This will be a multi-line. And meta keywords. You could add other types of meta tags. Keep in mind when you're defining fields for a base item, or a base template item, you will have to make sure that you don't go too crazy. If, for example, you want to add a meta author, that might be some sort of base page author template that you might create as a base one. And then you could have an article item that inherits from base page as well as base page article. And then it would just combine those fields into one. So another kind of cool trick, those that have never worked with creating templates before, is if in one of the base templates you define meta information and you define some fields, if you create another base template and you call it also the exact name meta information and you give it new fields, when you inherit both those base templates onto one item or another template and you start editing that item, it will combine those fields into just one one section called meta information. It will combine the fields from template A and template B into one. So that's kind of cool, and it's definitely something to keep in mind when you're starting to create this structure of base templates. So I'll go ahead and save that. So now if you go back down to home, you don't see the fields here, but if you go to not content, once we define the standard values, which I'll show you here in a second, you'll see those fields as they come in. So for the home item, I don't know if there's necessarily any fields that we necessarily need for this. Some might say that a title might make sense. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on what templates you have or what kind of layout you have on your pages. If you're using the same layout across all your pages, it might make sense to just have a title field here. Although ideally that would actually be on your base page template. If you had stuff that's specific to this page, you might have them defined on this item, or also you might have component level templates that would define it on there. That way you could have more than one of a certain type of template on the page. That's going really complex. We'll try to keep this simple. So home item, we'll just define a standard values for this item. It's best practice, in my opinion, to create standard values for all your templates. A standard value is just this new item that gets created, and it just allows you to say, hey, if I typed title here, every item that gets created using this template will have the meta title will say title, which is cool. If you want some phrasing to be used across the board on all your home items that are deriving from this template. Another cool trick or tip is $name. So what this does is when you create a new item from this template, it will, when you give it a name, such as the home item, what it will do is it will replace $name with the name of the item that you create. So this is kind of a bad example, but if you had an article and you created, you put the meta title $name in for the article template, or article standard values template, and then you start creating articles and you gave it the name of, this is a blog article. Then when you open up the item, it will contain the meta title, would contain this is a blog item instead of $name, if that makes sense. So that's just something to keep in mind. There are some caveats to that. $name is really you can see $name in on items that it. So let's say you defined this now after you're already contain your content tree already contains a bunch of home items. It won't actually replace this value. It'll only replace it when it's created. So that's just something to keep in mind. You could alter a pipeline to always replace it, for example, but that's beyond the concepts of this training video. So, okay, so I created a home item. Now I will go ahead and create a site folder. So I will create a new template. I didn't save that, so I'll just save it real quick. I'll call this site folder. And I will have this. Ideally, I would have had this, I would have actually created a base folder, but I didn't, so I'll just have it derived from base. Next. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give this an icon. Typically, I give the site folder that I create. That's actually a bad name. I should have called it just site, but it doesn't matter. I would typically give it a folder icon, so I'll just give it this blue icon, blue folder icon. So, and like I said, best practice, click on the Builder tab, then your Builder options open, and click on Standard Values. And now it is there. So this kind of shows another opportunity. So ideally, your site folder would be the first item that you see inside the content tree, but then your home item typically would show up inside your site folder. So best practice, in my opinion, and in the Sitecore community, is to create insert options for these different items. What it does, it kind of restricts the content editor from adding weird things to weird folders that you don't expect. So I can say, if I go to configure, if I have the standard values selected, and I click assign, I can now select this home item and say, if you're on a site folder, if you insert a new option, the only option, well, besides a insert from just generic template, you will see a home item display, and I'll show you that once we get that created. So pages, double click, have it selected, click OK. All right. And lastly is the global. So I'm going to create it in the same folders area. After thinking about it, I think that makes more sense than configuration. So I will call this global configuration. And I will also just have this derived from base. And there you go. I'm going to give this an icon. Typically, I give global a picture of some sort of globe. Not exactly familiar with where that usually is. Network, probably. Yeah, so I'll pick a globe or a globe. And so this is kind of what I was referring to, like these are kind of like standards that I do across all my projects. So you'll see a globe used for always global config. I actually use the blue folder for all my site folder definitions. And the home item always is a house of some sort. So for global config, I'll create standard values. So I'll click on the builder, options, standard values. We don't really have any items that will go into this. Typically, this will actually also sit at the Sitecore / content main area. Global content, in my opinion, is where you would put content that kind of shows up across any specific site. So example, you might have authors or contributors for articles. You might have microsite A and regular site, the Acme website, they might share contributors. So instead of having to create some sort of weird, either repetitive creating contributors for both that are the same with the same content, you could create a global area where you define those contributors, and they would then you just use them when you're specifying an article template. You could have a contributor selector and allows them to pick one of those contributors that's already been defined. So, all right, that's pretty much it for this part. So now we can actually start creating this stuff inside the content area. So if we scroll back up, you'll see the content area up here. So for the first item, there isn't really any insert options because we didn't actually define any insert options for the main content thing. You can, but it's you'd be modifying the Sitecore template at that point, and there are some concerns with doing that, such as if you upgrade Sitecore, you might lose your insert options, which is not the end of the world. But anyways, so I'll insert from template example, and so I will create two items in here. I'll create the global. I'm just going to call it. Sorry. Rename global. It's best. So typically, I'll have a script that shows up by default or runs on create and rename, where it will create these items as lowercase and strip out any funny characters. So it's best practice to have these always lowercase, so that when you're working with Sitecore items that within your URLs, they're always lowercase. So I'll just call this global. But then I can change the display name by going to views, standard fields. This shows all the fields that are based off this Sitecore, and go here and just change this to global. So now it's global. All right, next I'll create the site folder. I will just call this acme.com. Actually, I'm going to call this example. Let's go with example site, I believe. Matches up with the site definition I'll be creating. And there again, I'm going to give it a little nicer display name. I'll call it example.com. So as you can see, typically I like global at the top here, so you can actually click home and click first. And so it shows up there. And now you'll notice when I right click on this, when I go to create the home item, it should be an insert option. So insert, and you can now insert the home. I'm just going to call it home. It's now called home. It's unfortunate. I love the tool that I usually have configured by default because it kind of handles all this for you. So that's it. Now we have a home item, we have a site folder, and we have a global. So that's it for the this side of things. I'm going to quickly do a publish. I usually typically publish the entire site, especially on my local environments. That takes literally no time at all, and then I don't have to worry about, oh, maybe items didn't publish right. So okay, that's it. Let's go back to Visual Studio. So here in Visual Studio, so to define a site definition, like I said before, it's usually the best practice is to create a patch config. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Inside this app config include z example, I'm going to start creating a sites.config. You can give this name whatever you think is appropriate. I generally like creating the configs that match kind of what the patch is that I'm doing. If you're working on a Helix implementation, you might give it more like a Sitecore.foundation. Well, if you're defining a site definition, you're probably going to be in a project level layer. But so Sitecore.project. example.com or something like that, .sites.config, something like that. So let's go ahead and create a new item, and I just need a web.config, which I think is here. So I'm just going to call this sites.config. So inside here, I'm going to give this the name of, I'm going to start defining an XML document. So configuration XML patch. Sitecore document XML config. Now I'm going to define the main part of Sitecore XML config, which is Sitecore, and then sites, which is basically the containing element for all this site site elements. So I will then start creating my definition for my example site. So I'll call this example site. Now the kind of interesting part is where I tell it how to patch. So I'm going to patch after the element that has site name equals modules website. And then I'm going, so that's pretty much saying that I'm going to create this site node or this site element after the other element called site with an attribute of name equals website module or modules website. So I'm going to now define everything that goes into this this site element. Target host name, example A2. That's the host name for the site I'm creating. Database is web, so that tells it what a database to pull from. So you could specify master for that. If you're working in a development environment, you might create that one to work off master instead. And a lot of these settings you don't necessarily need necessarily. Some of them are required, but all of them. So root path, this is basically what I was saying before. So sitecore.content example site is what we set up earlier. So that's just saying that that's the root path for this site. Start item. Is home. That's the home item inside that root path. Domain is just a domain related to security. Extranet. If you had a specific security model that you created, or a security membership provider that you created for a different, like Salesforce, you might call the domain Salesforce. You'd have to define it also with patches in another patch config file. But allow debug, say true, testing ability, cache HTML. This is actually kind of important, I think. So typically, I will have this off on my development environments just because caching can really confuse the developer, because they'll think, why is my breakpoints not being hit when I'm debugging, which can really cause a lot of pains for a developer. Cache, registry, cache. Like I said, a lot of configuration for caching. View state, not really that used anymore. It's pretty uncommon to see view state caching nowadays. entered items cache date, 10 minutes. I'm not exactly sure what that's for. That's the great thing about Sitecore. I mean, even when you learn a lot about it, there's still things that are kind of mysterious about all the things that you can see in the, I mean, the config. If you ever look at the site config, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. Even when you become an expert, you're not necessarily going to know what half that stuff does, or half of what even Sitecore inside the CMS, like what some of the settings do. I mean, you might not know what they do even after you become an expert. So it's kind of interesting about Sitecore. And I think as time goes on, they kind of deprecate some features, and they kind of leave them in their configs for backward compatibility and stuff like that, but they're not used anymore really, so they kind of confuse people. So that's pretty much it. I've defined that. So that's pretty much been defined. So let's go ahead and publish this. I think I've configured this recently. Let's just confirm. So it's pretty much just publishing. All right, so I'll publish these changes to my example website. So let's go back here. Let's load up a new window. And this will probably end up breaking because we haven't defined any layout options for our so just let's go ahead and on the home item, on the standard values, I'm going to go ahead and click the item. I just did a publish Visual Studio, so it's going to take a little while for the environment to spin up back up. So I'll click on presentation details, and I'm just going to quickly use the example basic that I created last time, and I believe I gave some renderings that we could use last time. Actually, I don't think I did. So I'm just going to define a layout and click OK. And click OK. And now you should see those presentation details also on this basic. And save, publish. I'm just going to publish this item. I'll just click this for this to be on the safe side. And now that's published. So instead of seeing an error because there's no layout for this homepage item, I should be able to go to the home item. This is going to be working. Saying it's no layout for it. Website. So now you get a not so friendly page, but it's just an example of that the page actually is working. It's actually hitting the home item, and everything is good. So in my next few tutorials, I'll probably start showing you how to create renderings, such as a view rendering or a controller rendering. And that will be great for to start building out these this site so that we can start building some really cool examples of how to do cool things. All right, that's it, and hopefully you've learned some things, and hopefully if you have any questions, you can just reach out to me and let me know if you need any help with anything. I'm here to help, so take care.